video is for beginner violin and viola students and also for their parents to learn how to unpack your case, where to place your case so your violin or viola is safe, and the parts of the instrument and the string names. This is for review for our beginner students for what they've learned in class and for you parents to learn right along with your child. The number one thing to learn when you start playing violin or viola is where to put your case so that it's safe. Our number one rule about placing your violin or viola case somewhere is to make sure that it is not close to heat or AC. Number two is to make sure that it's in a safe location that's away from little siblings, pets, anything that could really get in the way and not understand how fragile these instruments are. So I would suggest putting it on the floor, like I have, away from siblings and pets, on a table or a chair that is solid and not precariously balancing it all. You want to make sure that it's as stable as possible so that your violin or viola doesn't fall, even when it's in its case. The second thing I'm going to show you now is how to unpack your case. This sounds like a really simple thing, but there are a few ground rules that I want to go over just to make sure that your violin or viola is as safe as possible inside your case and after you take it out. So the number one thing, you can see my case here, the number one thing is to make sure that the smooth side, you have the bottom on the bottom and the top on the top. A lot of our kids will hold their violins or cases upside down, which can affect the bridge, which can really mess up your instrument. So how you can tell the top from the bottom is going to be more smooth. Mine is a little bit more heavy duty. But if your child's case has a strap, that's a telltale sign that it's the bottom. Usually the bottom is smoother and the top is a little bit more bumpy. So it kind of goes along with the shape of the violin or viola. So you should be able to tell from that way. You want the smooth side on the bottom. Most students have clips on their instruments that are here and here. Those clips need to be facing down so that when you unlatch them, you flip them up. That's how you know that it's on the correct side. So now to unpack, sometimes the students' cases have zippers like mine. Sometimes they have clips like I mentioned earlier. Either way is fine. As long as you have a safe case, it doesn't really matter if it's zippers or clips. So then you want to open your case. Up here you can see on mine I have 4 bow holders. Usually your child's case will just have 2. So the number one thing is to get out your bow if your child is at the point where they can play with their bow. So these bow clips vertically is putting it away. So you don't want to put in your bow and shut your case when it's horizontal like this. That means it'll just fall right out. So vertically, make sure that it's safe and sound. So you want to flip it horizontally and slide the bow out gently. And the first thing to do when you get out your bow is to tighten it. So there's a screw at the end of your bow, and turning it to the right this way tightens it, tightens the hairs here, and turning to the left loosens the hairs. We want the hairs tight when we play and loose when we pack it up. So I'll show you. Turning it to the right is going to tighten the hairs. And the way that we usually advise students to be able to tell whether their bow is tight enough or not is just to stick one pinky finger in between the stick up here and the horsehairs at the bottom. I'll show you, a lot of students tighten their bows too much to the point where the hairs and the stick of the bow are parallel to each other. This is too tight. This is going to do a lot of damage to your bow if it's this tight. So we want to loosen it to the point where you can just fit one pinky fingertip inside, and you can see the dip of the wood of the stick. That's a perfect position for your bow. It's just tight enough where the hairs will be able to play, but it's not tight enough that it's going to damage your bow. To unpack your violin or viola, some kids have a cloth like mine, some kids don't. It doesn't really matter, it's just depending on the case. And some of them, most of them should have straps Velcro straps that keep your violin or viola in place. If not, this is also not a big deal. It just depends on what kind of case you have. If you do have a strap, make sure that it is always strapped when you pack it up. You never want to leave the Velcro strap undone if you're packing up your violin or viola. This right here, mine is really dirty. It's a cleaning cloth that we use for rosin. So my viola, I'm using a viola right now, has a little bit of rosin on it. So we just use this to clean off the strings, and you can clean off the body under the bridge and things like that to make sure that there's not too much rosin coating your strings so that you can't make a sound. And one other thing about the bow, you will have something called rosin. It'll look something like this, probably not quite exactly like this, but here's what it looks like without the case. And this is for your bow. You don't want to put too much on this, and you don't want to do it too often. So what I tell my students, what I've learned, is you put a lot at the frog, this part down here at the bottom. You do it a lot because the frog is very hard to coat in rosin. You do it there, and you pull it all the way up the bow to the tip. You do the same thing at the tip because the tip is also hard to rosin, and then all the way back down to the frog, and then you repeat this just one more time, and that's all. And I would say for rosining your bow, if you are a beginner student, I would say rosin your bow maybe once a week. And if you are an intermediate or advanced, I would do one every day or every 2 days, depending on how much you play with your bow. So that is how to unpack your instrument. One more thing with the violin or viola. Most students will probably have a sponge. They'll have a rubber band that goes around here, or two, and then the sponge goes on the back of the violin or viola. Some students, however, will have a shoulder rest, which looks like this, and I'll show you how to put it on. There are little clipped sides that have hooks, like small, gentle hooks on them to put on your violin or viola. So if you can see, the side with the red sponge for mine is more dipped, and the side over here is higher up. You want the dipped side on the left side of your instrument. So you're just going to hook it on the sides gently and hook the other side, and then just slide it down till it's secure, and it'll look like this when you hold it up. So you can see that the dipped side is on the left and the lower side is on the right. So that's how to put your shoulder rest on. And the last thing we're going to go over is the parts of the instrument and the bow. So we'll start with the bow. So right here, this wooden part on top is called the stick. The white, yellow, whatever color they would be they're the horsehairs. This is something that we don't want our kids to touch no matter how old they are, because the oils from your fingers can really mess up the horsehairs to the point where they won't sound anymore and your bow won't work. So that's something to be really careful of, especially with young kids, is making sure that they're not touching the bow hairs at all. This part up here is called the tip, and this part here, where your child will be holding their bow, is called the frog. And then for parts of your violin or viola, I'm using a viola, but the parts are the exact same. From top to bottom, this part up here is called the scroll, and it's called the scroll because it kind of looks like one with the curly cues on the side. These little black things are called pegs, and in here is called the peg box. This is where the strings come up, are looped into the pegs, and then you can turn the pegs to change the tuning of your instrument. We try to tell students not to touch the pegs until we teach them how to tune. So parents, touching pegs is only for you when you learn how to tune a violin or viola, which we'll get to in another video. But for now, the pegs are off limits for kids to touch. The part at the top right here where the strings start to go down straight is called the nut. The black part here all the way down is called the fingerboard. The part between the scroll and the body, which is all of the wooden part, that's called the body. This is called the neck. So pretty easy. The neck connects to the body. So these are obviously your strings. So on violin and viola, you have different strings. So for violin, your highest string, which is on the right, is E, then A, D, and G. For violas, your highest string is A, then D, then G, and then C. This wooden part here is called the bridge. This is also an off-limits touching spot for the violin or viola. For this part is called the tailpiece. These on either side are called the F holes. It's where the sound comes out of your violin or viola. This part here, this is called a fine tuner. Normally on instruments, there are all four. Mine only has one, but usually your student or your child will have all four. And this is also another no touching spot. We shouldn't touch them because they mess with the tuning of the instrument. So that's something to also be careful of. And then right here is the chin rest.